The metal mule Max pannier is the only pannier to use a silicon seal to ensure they're watertight to IP66 classification. Metal mule, engineered to be different.
Oh, who am I? Yes, I'm Ted Simon. I've been Ted Simon pretty much since 1959, because before that I used to work for a fellow called Ted, and so they all called me Ed. But anyway, now I'm Ted. I became Ted and I worked on newspapers for a long time. And then I got a bit tired of that and I went and bought a ruin in the south of France and lived in it for a few years. And then I got itchy feet and I thought it's time to see the world. I'd been around a bit, but not very far. And it came to me in 1973 that a really good way to see the world would be to ride around it on a motorcycle. And I'd never had a motorcycle and didn't know how to drive one either, but it didn't seem that that could be an obstacle since there were any number of millions of fools doing it. So I went ahead, and in 6 months later, on the 6th of October 1973, I set off with a grossly overloaded Triumph 500cc Tiger and went around the world. It took 4 years. It was much longer than I'd expected. It was a fantastic, in fact, I'd have to say it was the great event of my life. And I came back after 4 years and wrote a book with all the passion that I felt for the journey, and that seems to have communicated itself to people, and it became a very successful book, and it's still being printed and read everywhere in the world. So as a result of that, of course, you know, I've been able to do other things and write other books, and people have always been very kind to me and invited me to things, and so that's why I'm here at this hub thing. Well, there was another book in between which doesn't get much attention, but it was a very good book, because 4 years is a very long time and an awful lot of things happen in 4 years, and I didn't dare put it all in one book. I thought the book would be far too long and nobody would publish it, and so when the book did succeed so well, I went back and did a lot of the other stuff that I wish I'd written in the first place. And so there's another book called Riding High, which is also about the first journey. In 2000, I thought really Jupiter's Travels has been read by so many people. I think probably nearly 1 million people must have read it. I thought it would be a very good idea to show them what the world was like now after 30 years later. So that's, it seemed, you know, I was 69 when I thought of doing this, but I felt okay, I felt fine about riding the bike, so that was a bit more eventful. I was never really hurt on the first journey, but on the second journey I did break a leg in Kenya and I broke a collarbone in Colombia, but they were very good accidents because wonderful things happened as a result. I found out all sorts of interesting things. So I wrote that second book, Dreaming of Jupiter, in 2004, was published, and then since then I did one other little book about riding an MP3 around England and around the UK. It was I thought it would be fun to do something very different. You know, it's the MP3 is the one with the two little wheels in the front, and I thought that would be a very appropriate book for appropriate bike for a very elderly gentleman to be tootling around in the UK, and it turned out very well, I think. The book wasn't as long as I would have liked it to be, but it was fun. It was fun. Well, that's very much because when I started out, I never had a deep interest in motorcycles. I just thought it would be a really good vehicle, And so for me, it's always, in a way, been just a vehicle for something else. It's not that I don't like riding, but I like riding bikes. But I'm not a very good motorcyclist, really. Not, in spite of all the experience that I've had. I remember when the first book came out, one motorcycle journalist in America complained bitterly. He said, well, he never even got up on his pegs. And actually nobody had ever told me that was something you should do. So I didn't know about things like that, and riding over sand and so on. I just had to struggle through with what little information I had, and I was never taught. The bike has been a sort of companion and not really a major focus of my experiences. But I don't know what I would have done without it, because it's a wonderful way to travel. Well, of course I don't like the bureaucracy. I don't like the way politics is getting in the way of it. And it's very hard for me not to make unfortunate comparisons between the way it was when I first did it and the way it is now. I got wonderful feedback from everybody, wherever I was. I was always a phenomenon, and so I fed off that, and I was able to get into people's lives and homes and really into their psyches, very easily. And I regret that now, because there are so many of us doing it. And there's such an industry grown up around it, and I'm not really very happy about the way everybody assumes that you have to be all kitted out and fitted with the best bike and so on, because I've shown that you can do it with nothing, and really people ought to put that ahead of buying stuff. I'd like it to be a fashion, and I think C90s would be they'd be a great bike to ride. On my very first trip, I met, coming back through Afghanistan, there were two New Zealanders, two Kiwis on a C90 with all their worldly goods on the back, and they'd done perfectly well from Singapore. I'm sure they arrived in good shape. So yeah, exactly, that's right. And I've just been reading this marvelous book by Antonia Bolingbroke-Kent about her trip through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, all the way through Laos and Cambodia and everywhere on a C90. And so it's obviously you can do anything. You can actually go anywhere on anything, I'm quite convinced. And so all this stuff about beautiful bikes doesn't excite me a lot. I think people would treat you just pretty well whatever you go on, but on a C90 or a Vespa, you're going to need much more than you do if you're fully equipped to do this huge Transworld thing, and it's needing things that puts you in touch with the world so much better than if you don't. I mean, it'll take you longer, so you have much more exposure to people, and you might well need more help. My idea was that it would be good if people could be persuaded to think more about what was going on around them while they were traveling, which means going more slowly, being more attentive, wondering about the reasons for things. Why is this food plentiful and that food is scarce, and why do people have to cut down so many trees to make charcoal? Why is the economy so terrible that you can't change your money? Or all these things that happen along the way have a reason, and they have to do with what's going on in the world. And I would like to persuade people to spend more time, put more energy into trying to find out why these things are happening. Come back with some kind of a story about that.
The Metal Mule Max pannier is the only pannier to use a silicon seal to ensure they're watertight to IP66 classification. Metal Mule, engineered to be different.